Hey there, welcome back. Tonight, we drift into the world of humans who were not quite us, yet close enough that their shadows still linger in our blood. Tonight, we're stepping gently into the life of the Neanderthals, our ancient cousins who shaped their days beneath Ice Age skies. Imagine the earth before villages, before wheat, before bronze or ink. Imagine a continent carved by glaciers, where mammoths roamed like moving hills and great forests breathed mist into the early dawn. It was a landscape of sharp seasons and deep silence, but also a place of warmth. Firelight flickering against stone walls, the smell of cooked meat rising from hearths, and families gathered close against the winter wind. By watching this video, you'll learn how the Neanderthals lived, survived, created, cared, and eventually faded, yet never fully disappeared, because a part of them walks quietly within us. Before we begin, a small note. If you enjoy these calm journeys into the past, I upload new videos every day, so consider subscribing and turning on the bell. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? I love imagining people drifting off to the same story under different skies. Now, let's step softly into the first moment of their world. The night is settling over an ancient steppe. Snow gathers gently along the ridges of a limestone cliff, softening its edges. Down below, the mouth of a shallow cave glows with the faint orange of a fire. A low crackle echoes inside, mixing with the wind that whispers across frozen grasses. This is a Neanderthal home. Temporary, practical, but full of life. The air carries the scent of smoke and hides, drying near the entrance. Within the glow, you might see broad shoulders, sturdy limbs, and eyes reflecting the flames. Their world moves at a slower rhythm than ours. The cold presses in, but so does the warmth of community. A few figures sit close to the hearth, feeding it with carefully chosen wood. Sparks drift upward, dancing briefly before fading into the cave roof. Outside, a distant rumble, perhaps a bison herd shifting in the dark, or the cracking of ice under the weight of winter. The Neanderthals listen, understanding these sounds the way we understand the turning of the seasons. Every hum of the wind, every track in the snow, every flicker of the fire tells a story about survival. The landscape around them is vast and ancient. Behind the cave lie rolling hills, each shaped by centuries of freezing and thawing. Pines rise in small clusters, their needles glistening under a thin layer of frost. Beyond them, the open steppe stretches into a silver horizon, dotted with the footprints of reindeer and woolly horses. The stars above shine with a clarity that modern skies rarely hold, sharp, cold, and unblinking. These same constellations glowed above the Neanderthals night after night, marking their hunts, migrations, and memories. Inside the shelter, tools rest neatly beside the fire. Flint flakes, bone fragments, wooden shafts waiting to be shaped into spears. Each item holds hours of careful work. A Neanderthal's hands were powerful yet precise, capable of striking stone with a rhythm that created edges sharper than steel. But those hands also carried children, cleaned hides, mended clothing, and held the warmth of another person in the bitter cold. Their life was not only harsh, it was intimate, communal, and full of quiet resilience. A child stirs near the back wall of the cave. Wrapped in a bundle of fur, they shift closer to an adult for warmth. Neanderthal children were cherished. Evidence shows they received close care, healed from injuries, and grew within a supportive circle of relatives. Life was short, yes, but it was shared deeply. The firelight reveals a small carved object near the child's sleeping place. Perhaps a piece of bone smoothed into an ornament or token. Whether it was purely practical or held a deeper meaning, we may never know, but its presence hints at a mind capable of symbolism, affection, and memory. Outside, the wind grows gentler for a moment. The cave stands firm, its entrance partly shielded by a stone slab and branches arranged to break the gusts. Neanderthals were masters of the landscape. They chose locations thoughtfully, using natural formations as shelter long before the idea of architecture existed. Their homes were shaped by necessity, but arranged with purpose. Every fire ring, every sleeping hollow, every tool cache reflected their understanding of the land. The flames rise clearer now, casting long shadows along the cave walls. Those shadows become a kind of language, silhouettes of hands, tools, bodies, silent gestures that echoed across generations. Each night like this was a lesson, a child watching their mother shape flint, a young hunter observing the patterns of migration, an elder sharing knowledge through gesture and rhythm. These moments were the Neanderthals' classrooms, shaping survival through closeness and patience. If you listen closely, you might imagine the sounds layered here, the soft grinding of stone, the quiet rumble of breath, the occasional murmur of communication. Their speech, if it echoed through this cave, is long lost, but the structure of their anatomy suggests voices deep and warm, perhaps slower, perhaps softer than ours. Their language may have been simple or surprisingly rich, but it carried everything they needed to teach, comfort, and coordinate. As night deepens, the cold outside sharpens again. The stars linger above, casting pale light onto the snow. But inside the cave, the world feels small and warm. Firelight flickers on stone walls that have sheltered life for thousands of years. For the Neanderthals, this was not merely survival. It was home, humble, practical, yet full of stories and connections that remain etched across time. The scene settles, the fire steadies, the wind drifts, and you begin to understand. This ancient world was harsh, yes, but also profoundly human in a way that feels familiar, almost comforting. Part 2. The shape of their world. Mountains, caves, and endless sky. The light of a pale morning spills softly across the ancient landscape, brushing frost from the tall grasses and illuminating the long silhouettes of distant mountains. As the world brightens, the full shape of the Neanderthal homeland becomes visible, a vast and varied terrain stretching across Ice Age Europe and into the colder edges of Western Asia. It is a land sculpted by wind, glacier, and time, and every fold of it shaped how these early humans lived, moved, and survived. The first thing you notice is the silence, not an empty silence, but a living one, filled with the low hum of wind sweeping over ridgelines, with the creak of old trees, with the distant thud of migrating hooves. The Neanderthals lived within this quiet tapestry, learning its patterns the way we learn the streets of a childhood neighborhood. Every sound meant something. Every shift of the air carried information. On winter mornings, the air smelled faintly of pine resin and cold stone. In summer, the scent of earth and wild herbs rose with the warmth. Ahead, a chain of limestone cliffs rises like the edge of an ancient cathedral, their faces cracked and weathered by centuries of freeze and thaw. These cliffs offered shelter in the form of caves, deep hollows carved by water and time, where Neanderthals built hearths, stored tools, and watched the seasons pass. Some caves were vast enough to echo footsteps. Others were shallow, offering only a brief refuge from storms. The entrances faced different directions depending on the region, but almost always caught the morning sun, warming the stone floor just enough to make the early hours bearable. Beyond these cliffs lie rolling valleys, dotted with small rivers that meander through tundra-like plains. Water was life, places to drink, to clean hides, to search for edible plants, and to watch for tracks left by animals moving toward the shore. Many valleys were rich with willow, birch, and small shrubs, whose roots provided nourishment when the herds moved elsewhere. Along these waterways, the Neanderthals learned the language of the land, finding safe crossings, locating fishing spots, and predicting where game would migrate when the cold deepened. The terrain was never uniform. To the west, mild coastal regions remained ice-free even during harsh winters, offering shells, fish, and seabirds. To To the south, warmer river basins flourished with plants that would not survive farther north. And to the northeast, open steppes stretched seemingly forever, a sea of grass beneath a white sky, where mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses wandered along ancient paths carved through snow. These herds shaped the rhythm of survival, their migrations becoming seasonal signposts the Neanderthals followed across generations. Everywhere, the land bore marks of the Ice Age, deep grooves cut by ancient glaciers, boulders scattered like forgotten toys, valleys carved by torrents of melting ice. Even the air felt shaped by cold, thin, crisp, and heavy with the scent of frozen soil. On clear days, the horizon shimmered with pale blue light reflected off distant ice sheets. On cloudy days, the world turned quiet and muted, as though wrapped in a blanket of gray. Closer to the forests, the atmosphere changed. Pines and spruces formed dense canopies, their needles muffling sound. The ground beneath them felt springy with layers of decaying leaves and moss. Here, the scent of life was stronger. Mushrooms pushing through the earth, berries ripening, small animals scurrying under branches. These forests served as places of gathering, teaching, and rest. They offered firewood, edible plants, and shelter from the piercing winds of the open plains. Inside these wooded areas, you might imagine Neanderthal tracks winding between trees, a group collecting dead branches, a child picking up stones by a stream, a pair of hunters tracing the movement of deer through soft earth. Their connection to this environment was intimate. They knew which berries appeared in early summer, which roots could be dug when the cold threatened hunger, and where certain animals returned every year to give birth. Farther south, the land softened into warmer terrain, rocky plateaus, gentle hills, and broad river valleys with more abundant vegetation. These regions provided respite during climatic shifts. When temperatures dropped sharply, Neanderthal groups may have moved from the harsh northern steppes into these more forgiving areas, following ancient routes passed down like quiet traditions. This mobility wasn't random. It was thoughtful, almost ritualistic. Each group had a mental map of the land that extended far beyond their daily walks. They understood where flint deposits lay hidden in dry riverbeds, where water pooled even during drought, and which caves stayed warmest through the winter nights. Over thousands of years, these paths created invisible trails across Europe, the first highways of human movement. If you listen closely, you can imagine the soundscape that shaped this world: the snap of frozen branches underfoot, the rhythmic crunch of snow, the ripple of a river breaking through ice, the sudden trumpeting of a mammoth warning its herd. Even the wind carried distinct tones depending on where it passed, warbling between narrow cliffs, sweeping clean across open plains, whispering through evergreen branches. For Neanderthals, these sounds were a form of orientation, a natural guide that told them where to find safety, food, or danger. At dusk, when the sky faded to a deep violet and the first stars flickered awake, the land transformed again. The cold sharpened, carrying with it the scent of burning resin from distant campfires. The silhouettes of animals moved across snowy ridges, and the world grew still except for the distant howl of a wolf. Under this sky, Neanderthals navigated with confidence, reading the glow of the horizon, the direction of the wind, and the familiar landmarks of their ancestral home. Their lives were inseparable from this terrain. Every decision, where to sleep, where to hunt, where to gather water, depended on the shape of the landscape, and in return, the land shaped them. Broad chests adapted to cold air, strong limbs built for climbing and traversing uneven ground, minds tuned to the subtle rhythm of seasons and migrations. As night settles once more over this Ice Age world, the mountains, caves, valleys, and plains lie in a quiet harmony, a vast tapestry of stone and frost stretching beneath endless sky. Part 3, Home in the Firelight, Shelters, Hearths, and warmth against the cold. The wind outside the cave mouth moves like a long sigh across the ancient world, carrying with it the scent of snow, damp stone, and distant pine. Inside, however, the air is warm and heavy with the comforting aroma of smoke. A fire burns at the center of the shelter, sending gentle waves of heat across fur-lined sleeping hollows, carved wooden tools, and small piles of gathered supplies. This is the heart of Neanderthal life, the hearth, the glow, the shared warmth that held their world together. Their shelters were never random. A Neanderthal camp was the product of deep familiarity with the land, caves chosen for their stable temperature, overhangs used to break the wind, open-air huts built from branches, bones, and hides whenever natural shelters weren't available. In many regions, rock shelters carved by rivers or wind offered perfect entrances, wide enough to let in light, shallow enough to avoid deep darkness, and angled just right to catch morning sun. When winter approached, they blocked the harsher drafts with stacked stones and woven branches, turning the cave into a pocket of comfort against the vast cold outside. Inside such a home, the fire was everything. Its glow illuminated faces, tools, and the curved walls of the cave, drawing soft patterns of amber light that flickered and swayed. The crackling of burning wood was a constant companion, a reminder of safety, nourishment, and community. Around the hearth, children learned by watching. Elders shared food, memories, and knowledge. Hunters sharpened their spears while sparks drifted into the air like tiny stars. Even in silence, the fire tied everyone together. The arrangement of living spaces followed a subtle logic. The sleeping hollows, shallow pits lined with grasses, hides, and furs, were often tucked against the back wall, where the stone stayed warmest and the air remained still. Close to the entrance lay piles of collected wood, flint nodules, bone fragments, and simple tools ready for the next day. These weren't messy piles. They were organized in ways passed down through countless winters, each item placed where it would be found quickly during moments of need. The Neanderthals lived with a practical order that kept chaos at bay. Near the hearth, the floor was worn smooth by countless footsteps. The ground here served as a kitchen, workshop, and gathering place all in one. Flint knappers sat cross-legged, tapping stone against stone with slow, rhythmic strikes that sent bright flakes skittering across the floor. Others worked animal hides, softening them with bone tools and stretching them near the fire to dry. The smell of worked leather mixed with smoke, creating a scent that must have defined home almost as strongly as the warmth itself. The fire also revealed the colors of their world, earthy browns of dried grasses, deep blacks of charred wood, the pale shimmer of stone tools, and the warm, reddish tones of ochre used to mark bodies or objects. Sometimes traces of such pigments stained the stone floor or the cracks of the cave wall, leaving quiet hints of aesthetic choices and symbolic thought. Even their shelters, built for survival, carried the fingerprints of creativity. As night deepened, the fire's light became a soft pulse in the heart of the shelter. Shadows thickened along the walls, stretching and shrinking with every movement of the flames. Children curled closer to their families, wrapped in layers of fur that smelled of the last hunt. Older members of the group sat in reflective silence, watching embers drift upward and vanish. For a moment, the world felt timeless. The same warmth, the same darkness, the same familiar glow that had comforted countless generations before. Outside the entrance, the wind brushed snow against the stone, creating faint hissing sounds. But inside, every breath carried warmth. Smoke curled upward through a natural crack in the ceiling or drifted lazily toward the entrance, leaving faint patterns like ghostly ribbons in the air. The cave held heat well, its stone walls capturing warmth throughout the day and releasing it slowly through the night. Neanderthals understood these properties instinctively, choosing shelters that could hold fire's gift with remarkable efficiency. On certain nights, when storms raged beyond the entrance, the group reinforced the doorway with larger branches, sealing out the worst of the cold. The fire's crackle softened into a low hum, and the shelter became a self-contained world, a place of sleep, stories, teaching, and rest. In moments like these, the Neanderthal home felt almost like an old heartbeat, steady, warm, and ancient. The texture of daily life existed in all these small details: the feel of fur under tired limbs, the sharp scent of flint dust, the soft murmurs exchanged between family members, the warmth of shoulders pressed close during the coldest nights. Every day began and ended by this fire. It cooked their meals, protected them from predators, dried their clothing, and anchored their sense of belonging. And yet, their shelters were not static. With the seasons, they moved along well-trodden routes, returning to favored caves year after year. Some sites held thousands of years of layered ash, each layer a silent testimony to the people who gathered there before. Neanderthals lived with a sense of place that stretched far beyond a single lifetime, creating a quiet continuity in an unpredictable world. As the fire dwindles to glowing embers, you can almost imagine how their day would end. Tools set aside, bodies curled into the warmest corners, the last sparks rising and fading, the cave settling into a peaceful hush. Outside, the Ice Age night stretches far and wide. Inside, the world is narrow and warm. This was home, not a structure, but a feeling. The glow of firelight, the scent of smoke, the closeness of family, a pulse of warmth in a cold world. Part 4, the makers of stone, hands, flint, and quiet ingenuity. Before the sun fully lifts above the horizon, the shelter stirs with the soft sounds of preparation. A few figures rise quietly, stretch their heavy limbs, and step toward the entrance where the pale morning light spills across the ground. The cold air brushes their skin, but their movements are calm and practiced. Today, like countless days before it, a part of their work will revolve around stone, the ancient material that shaped their lives, their hunts, their tools, and their world. Neanderthals were master artisans of flint, bone, and wood. Their tool-making was not primitive improvisation. It was skilled, intentional craftsmanship honed over hundreds of thousands of years. The Mosterian toolkit, their signature tradition, was a quiet triumph of human ingenuity long before writing, pottery, or metal existed. The heart of this craft began with a simple gesture: choosing the right stone. Across the landscape, flint lay hidden in riverbeds, chalk cliffs, and weathered hills. A Neanderthal could spot the subtle shine of a good nodule from afar. The best pieces had a smooth surface, a dull, waxy sheen, and a weight that promised sharp, predictable fractures. They carried these stones back to camp, sometimes across great distances, storing them carefully for later work. To them, flint was as essential as fire. Near the mouth of the shelter, the morning tools are laid out: hammerstones with round, polished edges, flat pieces of bone used for pressure shaping, half-finished spearheads, small flakes with hair-thin sharpness. A skilled napper sits cross-legged, holding a flint core firmly between their knees. Their hands are steady, strong, and remarkably dexterous. With each strike of a hammerstone, a bright flake snaps away, flying into the dust with a crisp, satisfying sound. The rhythm is meditative: tap, turn, tap, a quiet heartbeat of creation. These flakes are the essence of Neanderthal technology: thin blades used for cutting plants, scraping hides, cleaning meat, shaping wood, and every other task required for survival. Some flakes are long and elegant. Others are short and sharp, like miniature razors. Nothing is wasted. Even broken pieces have a second life, as scrapers, piercers, or wedges. This efficiency reflects a deep understanding of stone's behavior. Neanderthals knew exactly how to control the angle of impact, how to predict the line of fracture, and how to coax the core into yielding exactly the shapes they needed. A young child watches nearby, eyes wide, absorbing every movement. Tool making was never taught with words alone. It was learned through observation, imitation, and the soft guidance of elders. A napper might hand the child a small flake with edges dulled by soot, showing how it fits in the palm, how to grip it, how to keep fingers safe from the edge. These gestures passed down knowledge across generations, forming an unbroken chain that links ancient hands with modern ones. Even today, archaeologists feel a strange closeness when they hold tools shaped by Neanderthals. The edges still carry the intention of their makers. Beyond cutting tools, Neanderthals shaped wooden spears with remarkable precision. They selected straight branches, stripped the bark, and slowly carved them using stone scrapers. The wood darkened as it dried near the fire, and the tips were sometimes hardened in the heat to improve durability. These spears were heavy, designed for close-range hunting, where strength and skill mattered more than distance. To throw one required power, to thrust one demanded courage. But every successful hunt began long before the chase. It began here, in the steady hands of their tool makers. Bone, too, played its role. Ribs, long bones, and antlers became handles, wedges, awls, and even smoothers for shaping hides. In many camps, archaeologists have found bone fragments polished by use, their surfaces gleaming with the faint memory of repeated touch. This blend of materials, stone, wood, bone, created a toolkit adapted perfectly to their environment. Each component complemented the others, forming a system of tools that could build, hunt, prepare, and mend. Inside the shelter, the sounds of the morning craft continue. A flake snaps cleanly. A scraper glides across a hide with long, slow strokes. The fire crackles as one of the elders dries a newly carved spear shaft, turning it gently so the wood warms evenly. The air carries a mix of scents: dust from flint, the dry sweetness of wood, the slightly metallic smell of stone freshly struck. These tools were not made for decoration, but there's a quiet beauty in their shapes. The edges catch the light like shards of frozen water. The flint's surface carries subtle swirls of gray, brown, and blue, patterns formed over millions of years. When a piece is finished, its symmetry is unmistakable. It is practical, elegant, and deadly, born from a deep relationship between human hands and the ancient stones of the earth. Unlike modern tools, Neanderthal implements weren't disposable. They repaired what they could, resharpening edges, reworking broken tips, reshaping curves. A single core could be flaked dozens of times, each stage yielding new tools as the original lump shrank into a tiny, spent nub. This frugality wasn't just necessity. It reflected an understanding of stone's value, an appreciation for the material that sustained them through countless tasks. As the day grows brighter, the tool makers begin to organize their work. Finished flakes are placed in small bundles, wrapped in hide for transport. Larger pieces lie near the entrance, ready for hunts or future work. The napper wipes stone dust from their palms, examining the tools with a quiet satisfaction. Around them, the shelter hums with purposeful energy, the preparation of tools signaling readiness for the next challenge, the next journey, the next hunt. In these moments you can feel the deep intelligence of the Neanderthals, not in words or symbols, but in the precision of their craft. Their world may have been ancient and cold, but their hands transformed raw earth into instruments of survival with skill that still resonates across thousands of years. The fire crackles, the air trembles with the lingering echo of stone, and the tools of the day lie ready, sharp and patient, awaiting the path ahead. Part 5. The hunter's patience, tracking, strategy, and the pulse of the herds. The morning air settles cool and pale across the steppe, brushing lightly against the stone walls of the shelter. As the fire dwindles to a quiet glow, a small group prepares for the day's work, not with haste, but with a calm, deliberate rhythm shaped by generations of experience. Today, they will follow the ancient trails of the herds. Hunting, for the Neanderthals, was not a moment of frenzy, but a long practice of patience, observation, and the deep reading of the land. Outside the shelter, frost crunches softly beneath their feet as they step into the open plain. The sky above is washed in early gold, its light glinting off grasses that sway gently in the cold breeze. Far in the distance, dark shapes move across a rise, a small cluster of reindeer migrating along a familiar route. Neanderthals knew these paths intimately. They understood how the herds shifted with the seasons, how they paused near river crossings, how they fanned out in search of the last autumn shrubs buried under snow. A hunter kneels beside a patch of disturbed earth. With slow, practiced eyes, they study the impressions left by hooves, the depth of the prints, the direction of the stride, the spacing between steps, all reveal the animal's speed, size, and recent movement. To us, the tracks might seem indecipherable. To them, they speak with clarity. The hunter's fingers brush the soil gently, feeling the texture of the ground, testing whether the surface has been hardened by night frost or softened by a recent touch of sunlight. This tactile reading of the land is an instinct woven so deeply into their lives that it feels effortless. Moving quietly, the group spreads out across the plain. Their bodies are strong, compact, and built for powerful bursts of motion. But they do not rush. Instead, they walk with a steady, grounded pace, conserving energy in the crisp air. Their breath forms small clouds, drifting briefly before dissolving into the morning. Each hunter keeps their spear close, a heavy wooden shaft tipped with a stone point that gleams faintly in the light. These spears are not thrown often. They are thrust with force during close encounters, making every step toward the herd a careful calculation. The land around them opens into a broad valley dotted with frozen shrubs and patches of exposed earth. Here, the wind changes direction, carrying the scent of animals, musky, faint, but clear to practiced senses. One of the hunters pauses, tilting their heads slightly as they listen. In the distance, a low rumble rolls across the valley. It might be the shifting of a herd or the movement of a woolly rhinoceros pushing through thick grass. Whatever it is, it warrants caution. Neanderthals understood that patience was not only a tool for hunting, but also a shield against danger. As they approach the reindeer, the group shifts formation. Two hunters move forward like silent shadows, their feet finding soft patches of ground where snow muffles each step. Others circle to the side, anticipating how the animals might react if startled. This cooperative approach was essential. Their hunts relied not on speed or long-distance weapons, but on teamwork, a choreography refined through countless attempts, failures, and victories. The reindeer stand near a narrow ravine, their breath rising in small clouds. They graze slowly, unaware of the figures blending into the pale grasses. A young hunter inches closer, gripping their spear with steady hands. Their pulse is calm. They have learned this moment through years of quiet observation, how to stay downwind, how to step without breaking twigs, how to move as if they were part of the landscape itself. The first movement is subtle. A small stone shifts under a foot. A reindeer's ear twitches. The herd raises their heads, nostrils flaring. In this frozen moment, a single decision will determine success. The hunters share a glance, a silent signal passed through generations of instinct and training. Then, with controlled precision, they surge forward. It is not chaos. It is a focused burst of action. Hunters approaching together, spears angled low, breath steady. Their goal is not to scatter the herd, but to target one animal, usually the oldest, the weakest, or the one closest to the ravine's edge. The spears find their mark with powerful thrusts, driven by arms and shoulders shaped for this exact purpose. The force is immense, born from bodies evolved for close-range power. When the moment passes, the plain returns to stillness. The herd flees, hooves drumming across the earth. But one animal remains, its warmth seeping into the cold ground. The hunters stand over it, breathing heavily, but without celebration. Their gratitude is quiet, expressed through simple gestures. A hand placed briefly on the animal's flank, a shared nod among the group. This life taken will sustain the entire shelter. It is a moment of necessity, respect, and continuity. The work that follows is done with calm efficiency. Using sharp flint flakes, they begin to process the animal where it fell. The sounds are soft but steady, the scraping of stone against hide, the cutting of sinew, the snapping of small bones. Steam rises gently from the warmth of the carcass, drifting into the cold air like pale smoke. Fat, meat, and marrow are carefully separated. Every part has a purpose. Even the bones will be carried back, some for tools, others cracked open for their rich interior. By midday, the group begins the walk home. Their pace is slower now, burdened by the weight of the hunt, but the mood is peaceful. They follow familiar paths along the valley, passing patches of frozen grass that crunch softly beneath their feet. The sky shifts into a muted gray, and a light snowfall begins, each flake landing silently on their fur-lined shoulders. When they reach the shelter, warm air greets them, carrying smells of smoke and dried hides. The others come forward, helping distribute the meat, touching the hunter's arms with quiet acknowledgement. Children watch in awe as the adults carry in the bounty. Tonight, the hearth will glow brightly, and the shelter will be filled with warmth, nourishment, and the soft murmur of shared work. Hunting, for the Neanderthals, was never merely a task. It was the rhythm of existence, a collaboration between body and earth, patience and action, risk and reward. Every successful hunt was a weaving of knowledge, instinct, and endurance. And in that weaving, they shaped their connection to the land, to one another, and to the long lineage that would one day lead to us. The day fades, the fire crackles, and the hunters rest, knowing that tomorrow the land will speak again, and they will listen as they always have. Part 6. Gathering the forest gift. Berries, roots, herbs, and ancient wisdom. The morning begins softly, with a pale light filtering through the branches of a nearby forest. Unlike the wide, windswept steppe, the woods hold a quieter rhythm, gentler, slower, full of small sounds that linger close to the earth. The air here feels different, damp with dew, rich with the scent of moss, leaves, and dark soil. A small group rises from the shelter with woven bags slung across their shoulders, moving toward the trees with the same calm confidence they bring to every essential task of survival. Today is a day for gathering. To the Neanderthals, hunting was only part of the story. The forest offered its own abundance, berries that glistened beneath early frost, roots hidden deep in the soil, nuts that fell quietly in autumn, and herbs whose scents carried the promise of healing. They walked these woods with deep familiarity, knowing which plants flowered during summer rains, which grew only in shaded hollows, and which could ease pain, clean wounds, or soothe a restless stomach. As the group enters the forest, the light dims into a cool green shade. The ground is springy underfoot, blanketed with old leaves that release a gentle, earthy fragrance with every step. Birds stir overhead, rustling branches as they settle into their morning calls. The Neanderthals pause occasionally, not out of uncertainty, but out of attentiveness. Every fallen branch, every paw print, every shift of the undergrowth tells them something about the life hidden within these trees. They begin with berries. In late summer and early autumn, clusters of red, blue, and dark purple fruits hang from bushes nestled between tree roots. A skilled gatherer reaches out with careful fingers, testing the firmness of each berry. Too soft, and it has passed its prime. too hard, and it will taste bitter. Children often help with this task, learning by watching the adults sort ripe fruit from unripe. Their small hands move with surprising precision, placing each berry gently into a pouch made from stitched animal hide. Next come the roots. Certain plants hide their nourishment beneath the soil, their leaves small and easy to miss unless you know exactly where to look. The Neanderthals did. Kneeling in the soft earth, a gatherer uses a flat stone or a bone tool to widen the soil around a root. The smell of damp earth rises with each movement, carrying hints of clay and old leaves. Some roots are sweet and starchy, perfect for mixing with cooked meat. Others are fibrous and useful in stews. A few, known for their bitterness, were likely used for medicine. Herbs and mushrooms add to the bounty. The forest floor blooms with species that require careful knowledge, some nourishing, some dangerous. Neanderthals recognize subtle differences in shape, texture, and scent. A gentle squeeze of a leaf might release a sharp, peppery aroma. A crushed stem might darken the fingers with a faint green stain. These signs were understood instinctively through generations of learning. They harvested lavender-like plants to help with sleep, mint-like leaves for stomach discomfort, and various fungi whose warmth and flavor enriched their meals. In a shaded hollow beneath a cluster of old pines, one of the gatherers stops beside a fallen log coated in moss. They reach beneath it, their fingers brushing over clusters of nuts hidden from wind and cold. Cracked shells litter the ground, evidence that animals have discovered the same treasure. The gatherers collect what remains, setting aside a few intact nuts for eating and others for crushing into flour or paste. The forest speaks in these small details, and the Neanderthals listen with quiet reverence. Throughout the morning, the group works in comfortable silence. The occasional sound of laughter drifts through the trees as children discover bright red berries or pull roots from the earth with too much force, falling backward into soft piles of leaves. These moments, simple and fleeting, offer warmth in a world that demanded strength and constant awareness. As the pouches grow heavy, the gatherers pause near a narrow stream that winds between tree trunks. Its surface reflects the forest canopy like a shifting mosaic. They kneel to drink, cupping icy water in their hands, feeling the chill ripple through their bodies. The stream's banks hold more treasures. Watercress-like plants growing in clusters, edible leaves, with a crisp, refreshing taste. They collect a few handfuls, adding fresh greens to the day's harvest. The return journey to the shelter is slow and unhurried. They follow paths worn smooth by generations of footsteps, paths that weave between the oldest trees and skirt the softest patches of ground. As they walk, the forest opens gently into the pale light of the steppe. The air shifts, warmer, drier, filled with the familiar scent of smoke from the home they left that morning. At the shelter, the others gather around to inspect the day's finds. Berries are spread on flat stones to dry or eat fresh. Roots are sorted by size and purpose, some reserved for immediate cooking, others stored for future meals. Herbs are tied into small bundles, hung near the fire to release their aromas and maintain their potency. Children crowd around, sniffing the herbs, touching the berries, tasting leaves, under watchful eyes. As the afternoon stretches into evening, the fire burns brighter, and the gathered plants become part of a communal meal. Berries simmer with meat, roots soften in heated stones, herbs release their fragrance into the warm air. The shelter fills with scents of food, smoke, and forest, a blend that feels ancient, grounding, and deeply human. This harmony between Neanderthals and the land extended beyond necessity. They didn't simply take from the forest. They moved with its rhythms, knowing when to harvest, when to rest, and when to leave areas undisturbed. Their relationship with the land was intimate and respectful, shaped by long observation and quiet understanding. As night settles and the forest fades into darkness, you can almost imagine the soft echo of their footsteps disappearing among the trees. A gentle reminder that survival was not only about strength or the hunt, but also about patience, knowledge, and a deep, enduring connection to the earth. Part 7. The tender ritual of eating. Fireside meals and preserving the hunt. Evening settles gently across the ancient landscape, brushing the edges of the steppe with a fading glow of gold and rose. The air grows cooler, carrying the crisp scent of approaching night. Inside the shelter, the hearth has already been awakened, its flames stretching upward with a soft crackle. This is the time when the Neanderthals gathered in the warm circle of light, not only to eat, but to share, to breathe, and to feel the comforting nearness of one another. The preparation of food begins long before the first bite. A few figures crouch near the fire, arranging stones heated earlier in the day. These stones hold warmth like memory. When placed beneath a cooking vessel or within a deep pit in the earth, they release their heat slowly, turning raw ingredients tender without burning. This method, simple yet ingenious, allows meat and roots to cook through the long hours of dusk without constant tending. From today's hunt, strips of reindeer meat rest on flat slabs of stone. Their deep red hues shimmer in the firelight. Skilled hands move over them, sprinkling crushed herbs gathered from the forest, leaves that smell faintly of mint, wild garlic, or something sharper and earthy. As the heat reaches the meat, steam rises in delicate threads, carrying with it a rich aroma that fills the shelter with warmth. The scent is primal and soothing, promising nourishment after the day's effort. Nearby, roots dug from forest soil are washed with fresh water from the stream. Their skins are scraped gently with flint tools, revealing pale flesh beneath. Some are cut into coarse pieces, others into fine slivers that release a sweet, earthy smell. These roots are mixed with berries collected earlier, the combination creating a balance of flavors: sweetness from the fruit, substance from the plants, warmth from the fire. Children sit close to observe the process. They watch the hands of their elders peel, crush, mix, and tend the flames. Learning, for them, is not a distant lecture, but a quiet inheritance shaped by watching and touching. A small child reaches toward a bowl of berries and is guided gently back, taught that the sweetest ones must be shared with everyone when the meal begins. Cooperation, even at the hearth, becomes part of the slow unfolding of their lives. As the food cooks, another task begins: preserving the bounty. Fresh meat is precious but fragile. In a world where winters stretch long and hunts can fail, nothing can be wasted. Long strips of meat are hung near the fire, close enough to receive heat, but far enough not to burn. The smoke curls beneath them, infusing the flesh with a deep, earthy scent while drawing out moisture. Over hours, sometimes days, these pieces transform into a preserved food that can last through snowstorms or lean seasons. The crackle of the fire joins the soft murmur of voices. Neanderthals did not speak in the way we do, but the shelter fills with gentle sounds, rhythmic hums, curious grunts, the low rumble of shared emotion. They communicate through touch, gesture, eye contact, and sound. A hand on a shoulder, a quiet laugh, a child leaning against an adult for warmth. In these small exchanges, the bonds of their community deepen. When the food is ready, portions are distributed according to need rather than hierarchy. Elders receive the softest cuts, children the sweetest roots and berries, hunters the larger pieces of meat to restore their strength. This fairness is not sentimental, but essential. Survival depends on the well-being of every member. As each person takes their share, the firelight dances across their features. Broad brows, strong jaws, deep-set eyes that reflect not just hunger, but recognition. They are not isolated individuals, but threads of a single woven circle. The act of eating together becomes a ritual of grounding. Meat crackles slightly as it cools, berries burst softly on the tongue, roots offer a slow, steady release of warmth. The flavors are simple, yet full of life. Each mouthful carries a memory of the land, the forest that grew the roots, the plain that nurtured the herd, the stream that offered water, the hunters who risked their strength, the gatherers who searched with patience. After the main meal, the leftover bones are cracked open with practiced strikes. Inside, the marrow gleams rich and pale, a concentrated source of nourishment. Scooped out carefully with a sharpened flake, it becomes a delicacy enjoyed sparingly, each taste offering warmth that lingers in the chest. Even the bones will later serve as tools, scraped, shaped, and repurposed with remarkable resourcefulness. As the night deepens, the atmosphere grows softer. The fire dims into a warm glow that pulses like a living heart. Those not tending to the evening chores rest against the walls of the shelter, legs stretched, shoulders warmed by the radiant heat. Children drift into sleep, their breaths slow and even. Elders sit in quiet reflection. Hunters gaze into the flames, already thinking of the next path, the next set of tracks to follow. But for now, everything is calm. The scent of smoke hangs in the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of cooked roots and the metallic warmth of roasted meat. Outside, the night wind sighs gently across the entrance. But inside, the shelter is a pocket of stillness, a sanctuary against the vastness of the Ice Age world. These meals around the hearth were more than fuel. They were moments of connection, memory, teaching, and rest. A place where the day's anxieties melted into the glow of firelight, a time when the Neanderthals could feel the strength of being together, bound by necessity, but also by affection and shared experience. In the glow of this ancient meal, you can almost hear the soft echoes of contentment, a quiet gratitude for warmth, for food, for the presence of others in a world where each day required courage. Part 8. Families beneath stone roofs, bonds, care, and daily togetherness. Dawn creeps softly across the cave walls, warming the stone with a gentle glow that feels almost like a slow exhale. Inside, the shelter stirs not with urgency, but with the quiet rhythm of a community that has learned to move in harmony with the land and with one another. Here, beneath these ancient stone roofs, Neanderthal life unfolds through bonds that were deep, tender, and constantly renewed in the intimate closeness of shared survival. Family for the Neanderthals was not a narrow concept. It stretched outward like the branches of an old tree. A single shelter often held children, parents, siblings, grandparents, and sometimes unrelated individuals who had become as close as blood. Their world encouraged cooperation, not isolation. Every task, every struggle, every moment of rest was shared. The strength of the group did not lie in any one person, but in the unspoken trust that flowed between them. As the first light of morning filters in, a child awakens near the fire's last embers. Their small fingers trace patterns in the ash, watching the dust rise and fall in tiny clouds. An adult gently guides their hand away from a glowing coal, brushing the child's hair with a tenderness that feels timeless. Neanderthal anatomy tells us they were physically robust, but their lived reality shows something softer. Evidence of long-lived, injured individuals who survived only because others cared for them. These were people who did not abandon their wounded. They tended, protected, waited, and nurtured. In the warmth near the hearth, another child practices gripping a rounded stone, mimicking the motions they have seen their elders perform countless times. A mother or father watches with quiet pride, offering small gestures of encouragement. Teaching here is not a formal task. It is woven into daily life. Children learn by touching tools, tasting plants, feeling the textures of hides, watching hunts from safe distances, and hearing the sounds adults make while working. Through these small observations, knowledge passes down like embers from one fire to the next. The elders play a gentle but vital role. Their bodies may be slower, their limbs more burdened by years of labor, but their minds hold maps of the land, memories of migrations, and stories of winters survived. An older woman sits near the wall, smoothing a hide with practiced strokes. Her movements are slow but certain. A young boy sits beside her, captivated by the soft, rasping sound of the bone tool against the leather. She hums quietly, a rhythmic vibration that settles the air into calmness. Even if these hums did not form words as we know them, they carried meaning, reassurance, instruction, affection. Throughout the day, tasks are divided naturally. Some prepare food, others repair shelters or craft tools, while a few watch over the children. There is no rigid hierarchy, no strict division of labor. Instead, the flow of responsibility shifts depending on who is strongest that day, who is injured, who is nursing a child, or who has the skill needed for a particular moment. Their survival depended on flexibility, not dominance. Every person mattered. Affection is not only a human instinct, it is an ancient one. Bones of Neanderthals show signs of healed fractures, injuries that would have left individuals vulnerable for months. And yet, they lived, proof that someone fed them, warmed them, protected them. Within these shelters, care was not an exception, it was the essence of existence. When the cold bit hard, or when sickness came, the group circled tightly around the vulnerable, sharing warmth, food, and touch. Outside, the day grows brighter. A few adults leave to fetch water from the stream, carrying hide containers that sway softly at their sides. They walk in pairs, speaking in quiet murmurs, sounds that rise and fall in gentle patterns. Their communication was likely rich, supported by the physical closeness of their interactions. Gestures, glances, movements of the shoulders or hands conveyed as much as sound. A raised eyebrow might warn of danger. A downward tilt of the head might encourage patience. A brief touch on the arm could signal reassurance. Back at the shelter, a group prepares a hide for tanning. The scent of smoke mixes with the faint smell of wet leather and crushed plants. This process takes time, scraping, stretching, drying, softening, but it is done with calm precision. A child watches for a while, then moves on, drawn by the smell of roots cooking beside the fire. Another adult lifts the child playfully, settling them on their hip as they stir the meal. These simple gestures echo across tens of thousands of years into our own instincts. The way we carry children, teach them, soothe them, and share our tasks with them. During quiet hours, the shelter becomes a place of touch and warmth. A mother braids fibers into a cord while her child leans into her side, tracing patterns across her fur-lined clothing. Two hunters sit shoulder to shoulder, repairing the points of their spears, occasionally pausing to exchange a soft glance. A young woman combs the hair of an elder with her fingers, untangling knots gently, the act as intimate as any modern expression of care. Evenings bring everyone back together. The fire glows brighter, casting long shadows across the walls. Children fall asleep, curled beside siblings or held against warm bodies. Adults settle into comfortable positions, some leaning against stone walls, others reclining on thick furs. The shelter fills with the low hum of tired voices, the settling crackle of the fire, and the occasional sigh of someone drifting towards sleep. In this stillness, the bonds between them feel as enduring as the cave itself. Every shared glance, every act of protection, every gentle touch reminds us that these were not cold, brutal beings, but humans in their own right, humans who loved, nurtured, consoled, and lived in a warmth not defined by comfort, but by closeness. As night deepens, the family drifts into dreams wrapped in furs and firelight. Outside, the world grows quiet, but inside the shelter, the soft sound of breathing fills the air like a lullaby, a reminder that survival was never only about strength, but about the deep, unbreakable connections that held their world together. Part 9. Illness, Strength, and Healing in a Harsh World. The night has barely lifted when a soft unease settles through the shelter. Even without words, the group senses it. the subtle shift in breathing from someone resting near the back wall, the faint tremor of discomfort moving through the air like a quiet ripple. Illness in the ancient world was not a rare disruption, but a familiar presence. Yet what stands out in the Neanderthal record is not how often they fell ill, but how deeply they cared for those who did. A figure lies curled beneath a heavy hide, their brow damp with the cold sheen of fever. Nearby, a child watches with wide eyes, uncertain but attentive. An older adult kneels beside the sick individual, feeling their forehead with the back of a hand. The gesture is gentle, practiced, an act repeated countless times across millennia. In a world before medicine, before theories of disease or tools of healing, care began with touch, warmth, and the shared commitment to keep one another alive. The fire is fed earlier than usual. Its glow expands, warming the air, softening the chill that clings to stone at dawn. A pot is set near the flames, filled with crushed roots and herbs gathered during better days. The mixture releases sharp, earthy scents as it heats, aromas of mint-like leaves, bitter bark, and calming flowers blended by memory rather than recipe. These scents drift through the shelter, soothing the rawness in the air and offering a sense of steady comfort. Neanderthals understood the land not only through hunting and gathering, but also through healing. Their knowledge was instinctive and experiential. Some plants eased pain, others reduced swelling. A few helped clear the mind or settle an uneasy stomach. Over generations, these lessons became part of the communal memory, passed quietly through observation, trial, and the wisdom of those who had lived long enough to see patterns in suffering and recovery. Evidence from their bones tells a remarkable story. Individuals survived injuries that would challenge modern humans, shattered limbs healed straight, skull fractures mended over time, severe dental infections endured with patience. These recoveries were not accidental. They required days, months, sometimes years of sustained care. Someone gathered extra food for the injured. Someone carried them when they couldn't walk. Someone stayed awake through long nights, ensuring they were warm, hydrated, safe. Within the shelter, the group adjusts its routine around the illness. Tasks redistribute without complaint. 2 adults leave for the forest, moving quickly to gather more herbs and clean water. Another stays behind to tend the fire, ensuring its warmth doesn't falter. A child helps by bringing softened hides to serve as bedding. Everyone's hands play a part in the quiet choreography of healing. The sick individual shifts, groaning softly. A caretaker lifts their head and brings a carved wooden bowl to their lips. Inside is a warm broth made from boiled roots and small bits of dried meat. The liquid is thin but nourishing, its warmth easing the tension in the body. Each sip is taken slowly, carefully, with pauses to allow breath to steady. Even without formal language, the exchange carries tenderness, patience from the caregiver, trust from the one being cared for. As the day unfolds, the shelter fills with calm vigilance. Children are kept close, hushed with soft gestures. Hunters prepare their tools more quietly than usual, mindful of the resting figure behind them. The rhythmic scraping of a hide being cleaned provides a gentle, grounding sound. Outside, the wind makes low, soothing hums as it brushes past the entrance. The entire community shifts into a slower rhythm, one shaped by empathy rather than urgency. Occasionally, the caretaker touches the patient's hand or shoulder. These moments of contact are not merely practical, they carry emotional weight. In close-knit groups like these, bonds were vital. The sick were not burdens, they were family. Their pain was shared, and their healing was a communal hope. By afternoon, the fever rises again. Beads of sweat form along the patient's temples. Their breaths turn shallow. The elder mixes a new blend of herbs, crushing them between 2 stones until their oils release. The aroma rises, sharp, vivid, slightly bitter. The mixture is pressed into a damp cloth and placed on the patient's chest. Slowly, Their breathing deepens, the tension in their muscles easing. This method, discovered through countless generations of trial, helps open the lungs and calm the body. At dusk, a gentle snowfall begins outside. The shelter darkens except for the fire's glow, which now pulses like a warm heartbeat in the center of the room. The sick individual sleeps more peacefully. Their chest rises and falls with steadier rhythm. The caretaker sits nearby, eyes half closed, resting but never fully asleep. They listen to every breath, every shift, ready to respond. Neanderthals lived in a world brutally indifferent to suffering, yet their response was profoundly human. They leaned into compassion, not away from it. Injury and illness were not reasons to be abandoned. They were reasons to gather closer, to share food, warmth, and time. That instinct, the instinct to care, is one of the oldest threads connecting them to us. Later, as night settles and the fire softens into bed after bed of glowing embers, the shelter becomes a sanctuary of rest. Outside, the cold thickens, wrapping the world in silence. But inside, warmth and watchfulness hold the darkness at bay. The patient sleeps, surrounded by family, cushioned by fur, breathing more easily. Tomorrow may bring strength or setback, but they will not face it alone. The shelter's shadows wrap around them like a gentle cradle, honoring a truth that has endured across tens of thousands of years. To heal is not only to survive, but to be held. Part 10. Symbols in the darkness, art, ornament, and the first sparks of imagination. The night settles softly across the landscape, and the cave grows quiet except for the low crackle of the fire. Its warm glow stretches along the walls, flickering in patterns that ripple like the surface of a distant lake. In this half-light, the shelter becomes more than a place of survival. It becomes a place of expression, of marks, shapes, colors, and gestures that reveal a deeper layer of Neanderthal life. Though their world was shaped by cold, hunger, and constant vigilance, it was also filled with creativity, symbolism, and a quiet imagination that left traces far older than our histories. Near the back of the cave, where the stone turns dark and smooth, subtle lines are etched into the surface. They are not elaborate murals or detailed scenes, but simple strokes, crosshatches, circles, faint curves. To the modern eye, they might appear accidental, scratches left by stone tools or animal claws, but archaeologists have found deliberate patterns like these in Neanderthal shelters across Europe, carved with intention, repetition, and care. They are not random marks. They are expressions of a mind reaching beyond the practical. Imagine a Neanderthal kneeling beside the wall, holding a sharp flint tool. Their breath clouds in the cool air. They press the point against the stone and draw it downward with steady pressure, creating a deep, deliberate line. They shift their hand, repeating the motion, forming a pattern that may have held significance, a memory, a meaning, or simply the pleasure of shaping the world around them. The act is slow, thoughtful. In the dim light, the scratches shimmer faintly like ancient runes. Nearby, on a flat stone near the hearth, sits a small collection of pigments. Ochre, iron-rich and earthy, forms a reddish powder. Charcoal, crushed into fine black dust, lies beside it. Traces of manganese oxide create a dark, deep tone like the shadow of a moonless night. These pigments were collected from distant places, carried back to the shelter in small bundles of hide. Someone in the group knew where to find them. A cliff face stained with red, a riverbed shimmering with black minerals, a mountain hollow where the earth itself seemed to blush under sunlight. With these colors, Neanderthals decorated not only their walls but themselves. Evidence suggests they applied pigments to skin, hair, and clothing, perhaps for rituals, perhaps for identity, perhaps simply because the colors pleased them. A mother might have traced a line of red ochre across her child's cheek during a moment of play. A hunter might have pressed charcoal into his palms before a hunt, marking himself with patterns known only to his group. A group might have gathered near the fire, painting their bodies as part of a quiet celebration or ceremony, each stroke carrying meaning through touch and color. Somewhere near the firelight, a carefully shaped object lies on a flat stone. It is a small piece of bone or shell, drilled through with a tiny hole. A strip of sinew threads through it, forming a simple pendant. Such ornaments are rare, but unmistakably deliberate. A Neanderthal crafted this piece, smoothing its edges, drilling the hole with rhythmic patience, pressing it against the skin to test its shape. Perhaps it was worn by a child, or gifted to a partner, or carried as a token of memory. Objects like this turn survival into story, transforming a world of necessity into a world with traces of beauty. These gestures, markings, pigments, ornaments, reveal something profoundly human, the desire to express, to symbolize, to leave a trace. Sitting by the fire, a Neanderthal might hold a piece of ochre and feel its soft powder between their fingers, its color staining their skin. They might draw a line on the wall, not for function, but for the quiet pleasure of seeing red on gray stone. They might carve a bone into a shape that fits perfectly in the hand, its edges smooth like polished river pebbles. The firelight dances across the cave walls, illuminating the ancient marks. Shadows stretch across the scratches, exaggerating their depth, making them appear almost alive. Children notice these shapes, tracing them with their fingers, their tiny nails catching the grooves made generations before. In this way, knowledge is transmitted not through words, but through gesture, through the ancient human instinct to imitate, to create, to wonder. Outside the cave, night gathers more deeply. Stars shimmer above the steppe in a wide, unbroken arc. Neanderthals knew these stars, not in the way we map them with names and diagrams, but as patterns that returned year after year. The same constellations overhead during winter hunts or summer gatherings became quiet markers of time and season. Perhaps they pointed them out to children or used them to recall migrations of herds. Maybe they connected them to the marks on the wall, linking earth and sky through simple lines. In the firelight's glow, two adults sit side by side. One paints a smooth stone with a thin layer of ochre, then sets it near the fire to dry. Another holds a bone and gently scrapes it into a familiar shape, a pendant, a tool handle, or a charm. Their movements are unhurried, calm, shaped by intention rather than necessity. In these moments, the boundary between survival and art dissolves. We often imagine prehistoric life as brutal and unrelenting, but the evidence tells a quieter truth. Even in the harshest conditions, Neanderthals carved out space for imagination. They made beauty from earth and stone. They carried meanings that transcended the immediate demands of their world. Their shelters were not only places of warmth, but galleries of quiet creativity, living canvases where generations left small echoes of their inner lives. When the fire dims into a red glow, the cave falls into deeper shadow. Only the faintest marks remain visible along the walls. Crosshatches, curves, pigments, scratches, each one a reminder that long before recorded history, someone knelt here, felt something, and wished to express it. And in that act, they reached forward through time, leaving a whisper for us to discover. Part 11. Whispers of the Sacred. Burials, farewell rituals, and early spiritual thought. Night drapes itself gently across the ancient valley, settling into every hollow and ridge like a slow-moving tide. Inside the shelter, the fire burns low, its dim glow wrapping the walls in amber shadows. This is a night of stillness, not the stillness of rest, but of quiet reflection. A member of the group has died, and the air carries a subtle heaviness, a soft vibration of grief that lingers even in silence. In this moment, the Neanderthals reveal one of the most profound truths about their humanity. They mourned. The body lies near the back of the cave, wrapped carefully in hides. Nearby, a shallow depression has been prepared in the floor. Not accidental, not the result of erosion or practical necessity, but deliberately shaped. Archaeological traces like this tell a powerful story. Neanderthals sometimes buried their dead. They did not leave bodies to the elements or predators. Instead, they created spaces for them, marked by care, intention, and something deeper, a whisper of the sacred, carried across tens of thousands of years. The elders kneel beside the body. Their hands move with slow, steady purpose. They adjust the hides to cover the shoulders more fully, smoothing wrinkles with the same tenderness they once used to soothe a child. A few tools lie nearby, a flake of flint, a broken spear point, perhaps a pendant made from a perforated shell. These objects are not useful to the dead, yet they are placed beside the body. This gesture hints at belief, not necessarily a defined religion, but a sense that the person still matters, that their journey continues somehow, somewhere beyond the fire's glow. A young child stands close, clutching the hand of an adult. The child's expression holds confusion, curiosity, sadness. They watch as the elder brushes a faint line of ochre along the forehead of the dead. Red ochre, the same pigment used for decoration, storytelling, and perhaps identity, takes on a new meaning here. It marks the departure from life. It marks memory. It marks the threshold between the known world and the deep quiet beyond it. Outside the cave, wind moves softly through the grasses, sounding like a long breath. The group gathers around the grave. Their silhouettes form a loose circle, framing the body with warmth and presence. They do not speak in words as we do, but soft sounds escape, low hums, murmurs, rhythmic vibrations. These sounds resonate through the space like an ancient lullaby, soothing those gathered as much as honoring the one who has passed. Grief, for the Neanderthals, was a communal act. The burial begins. Earth is moved gently, placed around the body with care. Some members add handfuls of dried flowers or aromatic leaves, fragile offerings that do not survive in archaeological record, but whose presence is suggested by pollen discovered in ancient Neanderthal graves. This pollen tells a beautiful truth, that long before agriculture, before writing, before civilization, someone placed flowers beside their dead, not for survival, not for necessity, but for meaning. As the grave fills, the fire casts a warm halo across the entrance, illuminating each gesture with quiet dignity. A hunter touches the grave mound with their palm, pressing it lightly as if sealing a memory into the earth. Another lays a stone at the head of the grave, a simple marker, but unmistakably intentional. These small acts echo across millennia, revealing the shape of an inner life richer than we once imagined. Neanderthals felt the weight of loss. They recognized the finality of death, and they honored it. When the burial is complete, the group sits together around the fire. The flames sway softly, their glow reflecting in tired eyes. The mood is subdued but not despairing. It is contemplative, tender. One of the adults mends a small piece of hide with rhythmic motions, the sound of thread moving through leather offering a kind of steadying calm. Another holds a child on their lap, rocking gently. The past hours have shown that even in grief, life must continue. The living must still eat, move, gather, survive. Yet they do so with a slower rhythm, as if walking through memory. In the dim recesses of the cave, the wall markings seem to shimmer. The lines carved earlier, crosshatches, curves, pigments, take on new meaning in this context. Were they symbols of identity, calendars of seasons? Or could some have been marks of remembrance? A line drawn for a lost friend, a scratch for a fallen hunter, a circle for someone beloved. We cannot know, but the possibility carries a quiet beauty. As the fire dims further, the group lies down to rest. Their bodies settle into familiar patterns. Children between adults, elders near the warmest part of the cave. Their breathing blends into a soft chorus, rising and falling like distant waves. The burial mound rests near the wall, embraced by shadow, watched over by the flickering embers. For the Neanderthals, death was not merely an absence, it remained a presence, held within the shelter, within the memory of the group. Outside, the stars scatter across the sky, cold and bright. Part 12. Voices lost in time, speech, knowledge, and the passing of wisdom. Morning light drips slowly into the cave, illuminating the gentle curves of the stone walls and the fading embers near the center. The group wakes in a soft wave of movement, stretching limbs, quiet breaths, small rustles of fur and hide. After the heaviness of the previous night's ritual, today carries a different energy, a calm, thoughtful return to the flow of living. Yet the echoes of yesterday linger in the shelter, shaping the mood into something subdued but deeply connected. This is the perfect moment to understand the nature of communication among the Neanderthals, not through scripted language, but through a tapestry of sounds, gestures, rhythms, and shared experience. Though their words are forever lost, their voices can still be imagined, carried across time by the structure of their bodies and the traces of their lives. A young child sits beside the fire, playing with a small flint flake. They tap it softly against a larger stone, mimicking the sounds they have heard countless times. 3 adults sit nearby, repairing tools or preparing food, and without turning their heads, they respond to the child S, tapping with gentle hums, a kind of non-verbal reassurance that the child is seen, safe, included. These sounds are simple, yet they carry the warmth of language. Neanderthals had the physical capacity for speech, hyoid bones similar to ours, vocal tracts capable of producing a range of tones, and neural structures that supported memory, rhythm, and coordination. Their language may not have been as complex as ours, or perhaps it was simply different, more grounded in rhythm, breath, and intonation than in long chains of words. Imagine communication built from sighs, low vibrations, melodic rises and falls, combined with gestures so nuanced that they could guide a hunt or teach a craft without a single spoken sentence. Within this shelter, teaching unfolds naturally. Knowledge is not delivered in lectures. It passes through observation, imitation, and gentle correction. A boy watches an elder shape a wooden spear shaft. The elder moves slowly, deliberately, allowing each step to be clearly seen. The boy leans closer, eyes following the blade of the stone tool as it scrapes smooth curls of wood. After a while, the elder hands him a smaller piece of wood to practice on. The boy's first motions are clumsy, but the elder offers a quiet grunt of encouragement, a soft sound that conveys meaning without words. Nearby, a young woman shows a child how to tie sinew around a spear point. The process requires dexterity, and the child's fingers first fumble with the material. Instead of correcting them with spoken instructions, she takes the child's hands gently, guiding their fingers along the proper path. The child watches her face, learning from the shift in her eyes, the angle of her head, the rhythm of her breath. This intimate, patient teaching builds bonds as much as skills. Knowledge in the Neanderthal world extends far beyond the practical. The elders carry memories of seasons, when the herds pass through the valley, where the best flint lies hidden, which plants ease fever or stomach pain. Their stories are not tales in the modern sense, but patterns of sound, and gesture that hold meaning across generations. When they speak, their voices are low and rhythmic, like the murmur of a distant stream. Children gather close, absorbing each tone and movement with a reverence modern storytellers might envy. One elder, his face marked by years of wind and hardship, begins to hum a slow, oscillating pattern. The melody is simple, built from deep chest vibrations that resonate through the shelter. The group grows quiet. Children turn their heads toward the sound. Adults pause in their work. This hum is not a song in the way we understand music, but it is something ancient, a binding rhythm, a transmission of calm, a way of anchoring the group's emotions. Perhaps it is a memory of hunts long past, or a lullaby passed through generations, or simply a way to soothe the heaviness that still lingers from the burial. Outside the cave, the day brightens. The group steps into the open air, carrying tools, baskets, and small bundles. They move in loose formation, with children in the center for protection. Here, language becomes movement. An adult raises 2 fingers slightly, a sign to pause. Another waves a hand low to the ground. Danger nearby, perhaps tracks of a predator. A tilted head signals a change in direction. These gestures flow effortlessly, shaped by long practice and shared instinct. In the forest, a child picks up a plant and looks to an adult for approval. The adult responds with a subtle nod, yes, safe, or a slight grunt and shake of the head, no, avoid. This exchange, though minimal in sound, is rich in meaning. Trust and knowledge flow through these small cues. On the walk back, laughter emerges, not loud or sharp, but warm, breathy, rolling in the chest. Neanderthals likely laughed as we do, with breath and sound intertwining to express joy, surprise, or affection. A child trips gently in the snow, and an adult helps them up with a soft vocalization that blends reassurance and amusement. The child responds with a small, delighted squeak, gripping the adult's hand as they walk. Later, back at the fire, the group settles again into evening rhythms. A young hunter begins to practice the sequence of gestures used to coordinate a hunt, repeating them slowly like dance movements. Another adult mimics the motions of flint knapping, showing a teen how to strike the stone at the correct angle. Each act of demonstration is both communication and legacy. In the glow of the firelight, subtle expressions become a language of their own. The tightening of a jaw, the raising of an eyebrow, the tilt of a mouth. These cues help maintain harmony within the group, diffusing conflict before it escalates, guiding cooperation during stressful moments. Touch is equally important. A hand placed on a shoulder to signal reassurance, a brief grasp of the forearm to show gratitude, a gentle stroke of a child's hair to communicate safety. This tapestry of sound, gesture, and presence reveals a truth often forgotten. Communication does not begin with words. It begins with attention, with empathy, with the instinct to share knowledge and emotion. The Neanderthals mastered this art long before language took its modern form. As night approaches, the shelter falls back into calm. The fire dims into a soft glow. Children nestle close to adults, absorbing the warmth of their bodies and the quiet murmurs of their voices. Knowledge rests not in books or symbols, but in the living rhythm of the group itself, in their breaths, their gestures, their shared moments of labor and rest. These voices, though lost in time, still echo through us. In the way we comfort a child, in the way we gesture when words fail, in the way we feel meaning in silence, their wisdom moved not through script, but through presence. And in that presence, the ancient world came alive. Part 13. The Long Twilight, Climate Change, Arrival of Homo sapiens, and Fading Footsteps. The cold season deepens with a slow and steady insistence. Outside the shelter, The wind carries a sharper bite, threading itself through the grasses and sweeping across the open plains like a restless spirit. Snow gathers in soft ridges against ancient stones, and the world takes on a muted palette of whites, grays, and pale blues. Though the fire inside the cave glows warmly, a subtle tension lingers in the air, a quiet recognition that the world, once familiar, has begun to shift in ways that cannot be ignored. For generations, Neanderthals adapted beautifully to the rhythms of this land. They endured its deep winters, its sudden storms, its unpredictable migrations. But the Ice Age was never stable. It pulsed with cycles of warmth and cold, pushing and pulling the environment into constant change. In this era, the climate began to shift more dramatically. Forests retreating, grasslands expanding, and the great herds altering their ancient paths. The land the Neanderthals knew intimately became, slowly but steadily, a landscape written in a new dialect. This shift in climate brought more than new temperatures. It changed where animals moved, how plants grew, and how long winters lasted. A hunting ground that once overflowed with reindeer might suddenly stand empty. A valley that supported abundant roots could become brittle and dry. These changes did not happen overnight, but they accumulated across centuries, pressing upon each generation a little more heavily than the last. The Neanderthals responded as they always had, with resilience, patience, and adaptation. They moved to new regions, sought new shelters, adjusted their hunting strategies. Their bodies, shaped for cold endurance and immense strength, helped them weather these trials. Yet even their remarkable abilities were soon tested by another presence, one that arrived not with storms or frost, but on quiet footsteps. From the south and east came beings who looked like them, but not quite. Humans, Homo sapiens, began to walk into the same valleys and forests the Neanderthals called home. Their appearance was subtle at first, perhaps only a few families settling near a river or sheltering in a cave. But over time, the encounters grew more frequent. For thousands of years, these two human species lived side by side, sometimes close enough to see the smoke of each other's fires drifting into the same sky. To imagine these meetings is to imagine a strange, charged moment in human history. Two intelligent, creative species facing one another across the snow, each seeing a reflection of themselves in the other. Familiar, yet uncanny. There may have been curiosity, caution, even cooperation. Scientific evidence hints at periods of overlap, of shared landscapes, of contact that was both peaceful and intimate. The DNA of modern humans carries fragments of these encounters, inherited through quiet unions that left an indelible mark on our lineage. But coexistence was not without challenges. The newcomers brought new ways of living, lighter bodies suited for long-distance travel, tools that grew increasingly refined, perhaps even more elaborate language. They hunted differently, moved differently, thought differently. Over time, these subtle differences accumulated into a widening gap. Competition for resources increased as climate change tightened its grip. Regions that could once support two populations struggled to support even one. Inside the Neanderthal shelters, the atmosphere grew heavier across the generations. Some hunting parties returned empty-handed more often. Winters felt longer. Children grew up hearing stories not only of mammoths and reindeer, but of the other humans in distant valleys. Creatures like themselves, but strange, clever, swift. Whether these stories carried fear or fascination, we cannot know, but they became part of the shared memory. In some regions, Neanderthal groups grew smaller. A shelter once filled with the sounds of children playing might fall into silence as families migrated or faded. The fire that once crackled brightly in the hearth might be left to fizzle out, its smoke trailing upward into abandoned air. Footprints along familiar paths began to thin. The once strong rhythm of their lives slowed, becoming a quieter echo of itself. Yet even in these final chapters, Neanderthals did not vanish abruptly. They held on with incredible endurance. Some communities persisted longer than others, finding pockets of land that remained rich in resources or discovering ways to survive alongside the newcomers. They crafted tools, tended fires, raised children, mourned their dead, and kept their knowledge alive as long as the land allowed. Their twilight was not a moment, it was an age, a long, gradual ebbing of presence rather than a sudden disappearance. And in that twilight, they left traces that endure even now. Tools scattered across riverbeds, pigments lining cave walls, hearths buried beneath centuries of sediment, and most enduring of all fragments of their genome carried quietly within millions of people alive today. As the stars gather overhead, the shelter grows quiet. A small family sits by the fire, their silhouettes trembling with the motion of the flames. They speak softly, exchanging gestures and hums that have bound them together through countless trials. Outside, the snow glows faintly under a rising moon. The world is changing, the land is shifting. The newcomers walk in the distance, following their own ancient paths. Yet the Neanderthals remain, in this moment, in their breath, in their warmth, in the glowing circle of the fire. They do not know the shape of the future, nor do they sense that their lineage is approaching its final horizon. They simply live, as they always have, anchored to the present, shaped by care, skill, and resilience. Their footsteps, though growing fainter, still pulse gently across the ancient earth. In the long twilight of their age, they persevere with dignity, leaving behind, not silence, but memory. Part 14. Their echo in us. DNA, legacy, and the memory of an ancient people night settles gently across the steppe, weaving darkness through the pines and turning the snowy ridges into soft, silver silhouettes. Inside the shelter, the fire glows with a steady warmth, its embers pulsing like the last quiet heartbeat of an ancient world. Around it, the Neanderthals rest. They do not know, cannot know, that they are among the final generations of their people. For them, life continues with the same quiet determination as always, gathering, hunting, shaping tools, comforting children, mourning losses, celebrating warmth when the winter relents. Yet, time moves in slow but inevitable currents. Over thousands of years, as climates shift and new humans spread across the land, Neanderthal groups grow smaller, more isolated, more vulnerable, and eventually their presence fades, not with a dramatic final moment, but with a soft, gradual vanishing, a fire left unattended, a shelter not returned to, a set of footprints along a riverbank erased by thawing ice. But disappearance is not the same as erasure. Even as their final communities dwindled, something remarkable was already happening, something that ensured their essence would outlast their physical presence. In the quiet overlaps between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, their lives touched, families formed, children were born who carried within them a blend of two ancient human worlds. These unions were not mere encounters between species. They were moments of shared existence, connection, and survival. Today, their genetic traces remain inside millions of people, layered into our DNA like faint but enduring memories. For those living outside Africa, between 1 and 4% of the genome whispers of Neanderthal ancestry. These fragments guide how our immune systems respond to illness, how our bodies process sunlight, how our hair grows, how our skin senses cold. Their adaptations, forged over millennia in the icy landscapes of Eurasia, were carried forward subtly, silently, shaping the biology of generations who would never know their name. In this sense, the Neanderthals never truly vanished. They joined us. Imagine their legacy not as a fading ember, but as a thread woven into the larger tapestry of humanity. A hunter's strength in the cold, a healer's knowledge of plants, a child's curiosity in the flicker of firelight. These qualities remain alive in the genetic code that travels through time, unbroken from shelter to village to city to world. Their cultural legacy endures in another way, in the realization that the human story is not a straight line, but a braided river. For many years, their memory was overshadowed by caricature, the image of brutish beings overshadowed by superior newcomers. But science has illuminated a different truth. They were skilled, emotional, adaptable, creative, and deeply human. Their shelters were places of comfort. Their tools were precise and effective. Their rituals carried meaning. Their families were bound by care. As we look at the cave walls where they carved simple symbols, or the pigments they collected from distant cliffs, or the graves where they placed flowers beside their dead, we become witnesses to a lineage full of depth and tenderness. Tonight, in the quiet glow of the ancient fire, imagine a final Neanderthal family resting together. The fire's warmth gathers around them, reflecting softly in their dark, deep-set eyes. One child leans against an elder, tracing tiny lines in the ash while humming softly, a sound too faint to be recorded in the fossil record, but powerful enough to echo across time in our imagination. Outside, the cold presses in, but inside, the shelter remains warm, filled with life. Over many generations, their footsteps fade from the land, but not from the world. Snow covers their trails, forests reclaim their paths, rivers rewrite their valleys, but something of them, their strength, their patience, their tenderness, survives in us, carried quietly through blood and memory. Modern humans, scattered across continents, still carry echoes of their voices, in our bones, in our skin, in the way we feel warmth or cold, in the calm persistence that pushes us through hardship, in the instinct to care for one another in moments of sickness or sorrow. These are ancient, shared truths, older than any written story. As dawn begins to rise over this imagined final shelter, the world shifts once more. A pale golden light touches the cave walls, brushing over the fading embers. Somewhere far away, other humans, our direct ancestors, walk across a valley, unaware that something vast and quiet has just ended. But the ending is also a beginning. The Neanderthals live on, not as ghosts, not as relics, but as threads woven into the human story, present in every breath of those who carry their legacy. If you listen closely, you may still hear them, in the silence between words, in the softness of a shared fire, in the memory of an ancient bond that shaped us all. And so, as this long journey through their world reaches its close, we honor them, not as strangers from a distant past, but as family.